Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Because Football podcast. This is your host, Andrew. Today, we're going to talk about some amazing things going on in American soccer with Jeremy Alumbaugh, the president of the USL Championship. Everything from fan connections, building community, what USL is offering uniquely within American soccer, as well as some of his background and journey. So we're excited to get into it. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. Glad this worked out. I found some time, and welcome back from all of your travels out documenting everything that you've been doing over the last couple of months. So happy to be here today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to be home. Like I keep saying, everybody, so grateful. Really appreciated the chance to travel around the world the last, year and a half. I think it was 20 countries. I was able to experience soccer and community and cultures. But all that traveling, really just made me think more about home, ironically, and what we've got going on here in the U.S. And I think when we look at a lot of the exciting stories, both of newer developments, but opportunities with the World Cup on our doorstep and a lot of things going on at USL, the various leagues you guys have got, whether it's Championship, League One, League Two, Women's Super League, like there's a lot of amazing stories, big and small, happening there. So we're excited to get into it. But before we do that, I want to get in some of your background a little bit. And I'd love you to tell us, what's your earliest memory of soccer?
That's a tough one because really soccer's been all my memories are with soccer. I have a little bit of a unique situation that the small farming community that I grew up in northern Illinois, a little town called Hinckley, which is famous for being the first home of the first Globetrotters, Harlem Globetrotters game, actually. And so there's a lot of history there in that small little place. But soccer was it. We did not have American football or even baseball at the high school level. We had Little League baseball, which, I played, and, you played football in the side yard and, all those things. But there was, obviously I knew what American football was. My earliest memories were going to high school soccer games where it was the event in the town, and the homecoming parade featured the soccer team. When the soccer team went to state as one of the smallest schools, this is before we had class 1A through class 11A or whatever they have now in all these states, right? It was literally one for soccer. We were the small little farming town going there to play against the big suburbs and the big St. Louis suburbs teams on the Illinois side, and that was a big deal. So my earliest memories were going there and how important it was, a big deal to become a ball boy, at a high school game, riding on the homecoming parade. My dad was a coach at the high school in my early years, and then became a principal and wasn't coaching anymore. But that's all I know. And supposedly, I went to go see Pele play at Soldier Field back in the old NASL days. I do remember, it was interesting being there last weekend. I do remember going to Chicago Sting games at Comiskey and Wrigley when they would flip-flop between those two venues when they didn't play at Soldier Field anymore. 82 World Cup, Italy won. Remember going outside and practicing in the side yard. And at the time, none of the Italian players were wearing shin guards. So I thought it was cool. I'd roll my blue socks down, which were the same color as the Italy team that I just watched on ABC Sports. So yeah, it's majority of my life and my young memories have been based around soccer. And again, a unique, upbringing that way.
Unique is the word, because that's something that is shocking to me of that experience. Like that's such a small minority percentage of what the average experience is in a lot of American communities. Before we get into a little bit more of your journey, I'm curious, like, why? Was it just being a small town and there maybe wasn't enough for American football? Was it some kind of background of like, hey, we were settled by immigrants from a certain place and they really brought the game? Like looking back or experiencing it, it was so natural and normal to you, but why?
It's a great question, and one that I've never really asked, because we moved away from there and at the end of fifth grade, and we moved to Champaign, Illinois, which had American football and didn't have soccer in the high schools. And so I was like, well, what is this? This is not how it's supposed to be. And of course, like I said, I knew about American football. I think it's probably the size of the community and, the size of the school, the resources that it takes to put on a soccer program compared to other sports. And I think the workmanlike mentality as well of the community, and like any good soccer, project in the States, comes down to a couple key people. And I remember My parents were just back there a couple weeks ago with my nephew, driving him through and showing him where we grew up and where his dad grew up and all that. And Larry Peppers was the high school coach, and I imagine it was people like him, people like Dave Maxim, who was a good friend of my dad, who was an English person, Englishman that came over. I think it was just those connections and those people. And so whether it's Peter Wilt or other guys in this country that have driven the game and have made it what it is today, and go back Hank Steinbrecher, people that have been around, Dan Flynn. I think it comes down to people. So I imagine it was size of the community, resources, that workman-like farm mentality of hard work Midwest kind of fit in with it. But man, it was a really fun time and a fun little town to grow up in.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, like the individuals, because obviously, yeah, we need all of us to come together to make things happen. But a lot of time it is that vision, that leadership from just a few people that can make something bigger, right? When if we submit it to the community at large, there might be some naysayers, but it's those people who serve, who give, who sacrifice, so much of their energy and passion to kind of create things. And I think, yeah, you look around the country and there have been a lot of people involved in that. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, even if they were quieter or times that, soccer wasn't so in the news or mainstream. And we have such a kind of a quirky, interesting up and down history in this country. It's important to kind of acknowledge those people, but whether they're coaches or administrators, and I know those are roles that you've held, right, as a player, then becoming a coach. I'm curious when the change happened. When I was looking at some of your background, you had a background as a youth coach, right? And coaching in university and different levels, and then got this opportunity, it seems like, with in St. Louis, more of like a director role. So I'm curious if you could take us back to that period in time for you. What was that like in terms of making that type of professional jump from the sidelines more to the boardroom? And what did you draw on in terms of, some of your abilities or your past experience to help you step into that kind of role?
Sure. I think I was the only guy that raised his hand that he was willing to be the GM for this new USL project on the management team. I think that's how it worked. It was never something that I had planned. It was never a goal. I think a lot of times now when I visit with interns or people getting into the business, they talk about what their next step is before they've even started their first step. And I just wasn't that way. I always chased good people and projects that I believed in. And so when I went to St. Louis to start coaching, I believed in the people that were there, the people I was going to get to work with on a daily basis. And then from there, it just was able to grow and develop. And so when the decision was made to bring the USL team to town, it wasn't something that I had planned out or that I was wanting to do. Now the team was owned by the same youth club I was working for, so that made it an easier transition, and it just felt natural. And I think a lot of that is because of the places you talk about. What lessons did I take with me? I was really fortunate, both at the university level at Missouri State University, my time with the Chicago Magic and Mike Makovich, who was a massive influence on my career, and then going to Springfield, Missouri, then up to St. Louis. All of those places took the operational, the administrative parts of the game just as serious as they did, on the field. And we won national championships with the Chicago Magic, went to the NCAAs in Missouri State, great time in Springfield. Obviously the same in St. Louis. The track record there speaks for itself with St. Louis Scott Gallagher and the type of players we were able to work with and teams and all those things. But I had really good mentors at all those stops that taught me a lot of administrative skills, how to manage up, how to manage across, how to manage down. And so I took just the importance for relationships. So that kind of carried over naturally into communicating with season ticket holders, communicating with board members, going into I remember one of the first partnership pitches, myself and Patrick Barry, the president of the club, we went and pitched a car dealership about, I think, going on the sleeve or the practice kit or something. And it was pretty easy. They were so excited. And we walked out like, well, that was easy. Well, it wasn't always easy, but, we took a lot of those lessons going into somebody's living room and trying to recruit their son to come to their university. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you were just doing all those things as a coach. You were marketing your program, you're recruiting players, you're winning, you're developing, you're planning. And then you really just base it on relationships. So I think so much of my coaching style was getting a group of players to believe in something bigger than themselves, to come together And so when it came to putting the USL club together in St. Louis, getting the Luigans involved, it just felt natural. And so I felt very prepared. I made a ton of mistakes. I still remember the very first player contract I filled out, and I called the league office, which is now where I work, right? Asking questions, and there wasn't a great response. It was just like, well, you can do that if you want. You can, some people do. There was no playbook. And so
Mm.
I kind of stumbled on a few things, made a few mistakes, but I'm so thankful for the places I worked at prior because I think it set me up, for that to be a really rewarding stop. We had some success as well, and obviously a few bumps too, but wouldn't change my path to get to that step, becoming a GM in St. Louis for anything. And I was able to gradually get out of coaching too, which helped. That first year, I still did some training. I was still doing some stuff with the younger kids in the youth academy, and that helped. It wasn't just cold turkey. You're done
Hmm.
coaching because you do that for 20 some years. That's all you know.
Yeah.
But it was a good change, and I'm thankful for that opportunity.
Right. And it's something I think about a lot too with many of the guests we've had. It's kind of funny how often this like serendipity and just the right things happen when you're working hard and you're trying to like live and work with your heart on your sleeve and just trying to be authentic and follow what you love to do. And I think being within the space of soccer can help that to an extent. We can look at a lot of things around where, we don't necessarily feel like the game represents the beauty that is at its core, now that it's at scale in many ways. But in general, I think a lot of the people that are in this space are led there by that pure passion. So from St. Louis, that was the first kind of takes you ahead of a GM role. And then how did this move to then you were at Chattanooga after that then led you to USL? Just kind of paint the picture a little bit for us with some of those steps for you and kind of how that kind of added to the richness of your journey along the way.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the unique thing about St. Louis was we were owned by St. Louis Scott Gallagher, which is a 501c3. So we didn't have the sense of an ownership group necessarily. We had a board of directors who were very involved, both with their financial support of the projects, but also the business side and the culture side of. You had this massive youth club of 4,000 kids and very successful number of facilities, great coaches, great pedigree of kids that would come through there as players and families and a lot of history. And then you slap this pro team in there, and you're expecting these two cultures to kind of combine. And where we landed and ended up was in a really good place, something I'm very proud of. But the unique situation there was the president, Patrick Barry, was the president of the youth club and the pro club. And so, as the vice president and GM, that put a lot of additional responsibilities on myself. And I'm thankful for those because it really gave me good experience, good opportunities to grow, to develop from ticket sales to partnerships to marketing to content, all of those things. And we had a great team there. But at the end of the day, Pat was always there as a president. And that's nothing bad. As much as I was involved day to day there, he was involved just as much, plus all the youth club. But there were, it was always wondering like, okay, can I go do this on my own? And the other opportunity that Chattanooga really presented was, again, to go chase good people and to chase a project that was really unique in American sports at the time and still is, with two professional clubs at the same level. And so that presented something that I thought, okay, not many places in the States are you going to get this opportunity. Even if you go to LA Galaxy and LAFC, they're at the same level, at Division One. But in a smaller community in a great city, Chattanooga, felt like, okay, this is a good step. And what it did was it flipped me from my day being 70% soccer, 30% business to the other way. In Chattanooga, it was 70% business, 30% soccer. And so that was another challenge and another growth opportunity. And, I went there for a lot of the original founders were still board members. Tim Kelly, who's now the mayor of the city of Chattanooga, we really hit it off and really look at things very similar. I'll never go into politics. He did. But I really had a great amount of respect for the people there. It was a big challenge, taking a club that had a really strong pedigree and history of, 10 years as a top amateur club, what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then they were making that jump to the pros. So it wasn't a startup, but it was a startup because it's a different model. It's a different opportunity in the community. You can now do more things because you have players in the market 10 months out of the year. if not 12 months out of the year. And in the summer team, you only have them for 2-3 months, and then they go back to school or what have you. So there was a lot of growth there. And I felt, for me personally, the opportunity. And so somebody hit me up on LinkedIn and said, have you seen this opportunity? You should look at it. I talked with Pat Barry and said, look, I think I'm going to take a run at this. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. What do you need? And so it all just kind of worked out. I went there on a weekend in October. It rained for 72 hours straight. They promised me it never rains like that in Chattanooga, which Peter Wilcock, your friend, was one of the guilty parties. And I moved there and took the job and found out it rains there all the time. So that was interesting, but loved my time there. It was a great journey to get there. And then obviously COVID hit. So that threw a whole new growth opportunity into everything. And, a lot of trials and tribulations that we went through there during those times, but came out strong. And it was a really fun period for me, for my family. And I got to grow a lot there and do some things and learned a lot too.
What I think is so fascinating about your journey is like you've just really just gone up and up. Whereas sometimes you see within, whether it's professional soccer here or around the world or professional sports, like sometimes there will be these like somewhat parallel moves from other industries where people have a background in finance, or they were in marketing in some space, or they were in media, or, they've been in healthcare, like some kind of leadership role. Right. And then they move into sports. And then so it's taken all the knowledge and that background they have, maybe whatever they studied and all of that into that role. Whereas you kind of went like the soccer route and then built the rest off of that. When you went to Chattanooga to then be the president, and that day became 70% business, where were some of the areas or specific things that you either were like, hey, I've got to really step this up, this is me, or, okay, these are the areas where like I got to rely on my team, on the people like you mentioned. I'm curious, like on that side, what was that learning curve like?
Always lean on my people. Always. I always talk with a couple of my good friends back from the coaching days about wherever you go, can you create a stable of people that you can count on and build a culture around those people? And we had some good ones in place. I was fortunate enough to bring some in that really helped turn the club in a good, strong direction during the time there. So always people. Goes back to St. Louis, the VP of Finance, Andy Cruz, his office was next to mine. I didn't know the difference between a pro forma and a P&L. I didn't know the difference between quarterly reports. I mean, I was swimming in it, and he, just dragged me along and slowly, and through Pat Barry as well, the president. So I gained a lot of knowledge there. And then Chattanooga presented a whole nother challenge, because we had, if you recall, they were the first club to do the public ownership, in the state. So they went out and sold actual shares in the club. Yeah. So there were 3,000 shareholders who had a board representative and then a number of board members that some of them were founders of the club. So I quickly learned, valuations, cap tables, where all that fits in, and got educated. But again, it's the people, right? I've been fortunate because of the choices that I've made. When I've had to ask a really dumb question, I was never pointed out, or never, how do you not know that? Why did we hire you? It's like, just always be transparent and upfront. Like, hey, I got a question about this. Here's what I think. And oftentimes they go, yep, you're right. That's correct. And you work your way through it. So I had to learn some things. Was also fortunate enough in St. Louis with Jim Kavanaugh and Tom Strunk. We're at Worldwide Technology and board members of St. Louis Scott Gallagher, huge business culture people. And they always just talked about, the transparency and, how you build that culture in the office. And I think when you do that and you get people that are bought in, your ability to learn, if you have a growth mindset, can just take off, right? And I think so. Everybody that I've been able to place around me and those that were already around me have helped me, get out. I don't have an MBA. Like you said, I'm a secondary education major from college who never taught a day outside of student teaching in the classroom. But, all of the steps along the way brought my business acumen, brought me up to speed, learned a lot, but, I'm still learning. And I'm fortunate here that we have great people in this office. And I had another level of learning when I came to USL. So it's kind of, I think, because it's happened every step. When I left Chicago, went back to Springfield, we put together a training facility and had to do a lease for an indoor space and put all that together. So that was a step on the business side. And then go to St. Louis, another step on the business side. So just fortunate, really fortunate for the people and the opportunities that have been around me. But I'm just a big believer in surrounding yourself with good people, have a growth mindset, be willing to put your hand up and say, I got a question, and then learn from it. And then hopefully you don't have to ask that question again. And I think that's when you gain the respect in the room, and really be able to communicate, well with people.
When we think of, hey, here's the things that you have to do to lead a club, people might not know all the ins and outs, but you kind of get it. Like, hey, we want to win. We want to get fans in the seats. We want to bring in partners that bring in revenue. We want to create like civic pride, right, around this. Then you went from the club to a league level, right? Which I'm curious, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are too. How does that change? What are those goals then, instead of like, hey, you're not necessarily judged on your club winning, reaching a certain level, having certain type of attendance. Now it's more of a league-wide thing. So I'm curious, what are some of the goals, the things that you're shooting for within your role? And then what do some of those kind of day-to-day duties look like as president of USL Championship?
Yeah, I think the phrase that was said to me when I was going through the process of looking to come here, because when they called initially, I said I wasn't interested. That was the first words out of my mouth on the phone. And the person that called me said, wow, that was quick. And I said, here's why. And then they replied with, well, here's why we think you would enjoy it, and here's why we think you would be good in the role. And so that opened up my eyes a little bit. I think the big thing that was mentioned to me was, instead of being able to impact one community with being at one club, is you're now going to have the opportunity indirectly to impact 20 plus communities. And that really kind of sunk in with me. I'm not there day to day doing the work that, Ron Patel at New Mexico United's doing. I'm not in Louisville, driving the crowds there, or up in Pittsburgh with the tremendous things, or you were just up in Portland, right? I'm not there day to day, but I'm communicating with those people. I'm helping them through things that pop up, whether it's on the sporting side and the business side, ownership changes, all the things that go on day to day. I'm there to work with them. And I think the fact that I've been in their shoes allows, when I have to pick up the phone and have a good phone call, or sometimes a tough phone call with them, I think there's a level of respect that I've done it. I'm not sitting in an ivory tower coming from this industry now into sports. And I've led a team of people that worked their tails off all week to get a stadium full and packed. And then 48 hours before kickoff, the weatherman says, hey, guess what? We got some weather coming for the next 2 days. And now, the crowd isn't there. Your per caps are down. The environment isn't there. Of course, the supporters are always there, right? Making the environment, but nobody else is there because of the weather. And so I've lived that, and I know how hard our clubs work to make an impact in their communities, on game day, but also outside of the game days. And so when things come up that happen that way, or a poor decision at the end of the game that sometimes happen, whether it's by a player, by an official, or a coach makes the wrong stuff, I've experienced all those. So, when I get the phone call or I get the text, I'm able to reply and be authentic with it. So my day-to-day is relationship management, some strategy, working with our team here, obviously all of the exciting things that have come out, over the last couple of months with our growth. But I deal with the clubs day in, day out. We were just in Chicago for our club revenue summit. We got all the business leaders from League One, Championship, and Super League together, ticketing, marketing, corporate partnerships, and just allowed them to best practices panels, brought in some tremendous guest speakers, just trying to drive the business and the impact it can make in a community. And some wonderful things happen. And so that's where I'm spending my time now, is working with those presidents, with those owners, with all the different people at the club level. And I take a lot of pride in what they're doing in their communities. I have a very small part to do with all that, but that replaces a little bit of that, thrills of a good win, thrills of a sellout. I watched majority of the games. I got 2 TVs at home. I got them up. I'm watching. I love going to the matches to see, the environments, and to give ideas, or sometimes just to say, what, I got nothing to add. You guys are crushing it. You're doing great with the environment. Sometimes you're like, hey, have you thought about tweaking this, or have you, thought about doing that a little bit? But it's relationship management. It's trying to stay in front of things, and it's enjoyable. It's different than being on the club side. And I've often said that I don't think I could have done this role for 15, 20 years and then try to go to a club. I'm so thankful that I got those opportunities to have those exciting cup runs, to have those bad losses. There's nothing worse than walking out of a stadium after a bad loss and there's the season ticket holder just kind of looking at you, right? Or the supporters group. you hear the rumblings, but so you miss some of those parts. Some of it you don't miss as much as maybe others, but there's handing out that trophy at the end of the year, seeing going to Rhode Island's opener after going to their first game ever last year at Bryant, and then going to this one. I mean, what a difference to see those things. So those are the moments that keep you pushing and keep you going, and just to see the impact that we're making in these communities.
And when you're talking about your experience and that you've lived it, there's that empathy that you bring to the role. There's that identification with what guys are doing. That can go on a side of like, hey, I understand, but also you got to raise the level here, or hey, we're going to help to fix. You mentioned having that community impact. A club does it on a local level. With USL Championship, you guys are in 20 plus cities and communities all over the country. And then we look at the rest of USL's pyramid as well, and just kind of the amount of impact there. For you, and even taking out the USL part right now, for you, like what are some key signs of, if we want to go real business, it's your KPIs, right? Those indicators, but like signs of life, signs of health, signs that like, hey, soccer is meaningful here, it's vibrant, and like it's doing something for people's lives in this market.
Yeah, I think you got to point back to the clubs. And again, you can only talk about the ones you're familiar with or the places you've been. And I think it comes down to their mission statements and why are they there? And we have so many clubs. It's obvious they're there. They're there for the community, and they're there to make an impact. They're there to grow the sport. They're there to maybe rejuvenate a certain part of town that's been forgotten, or a certain community that's been forgotten. And sometimes when clubs come in, or things occur that it can uplift and do, and we see the power of sport, and it can change the mindset of people, and it's a powerful tool. And I'm so thankful that a lot of our clubs, that's their first and thought of the day is how are they going to impact their community, and then how are we going to win a game, and then how are we going to have it. So I think signs that we see is that the level of investment being made at all levels of the sport, the number of facilities from massive youth complexes to futsal pitches in urban areas on an old tennis court to beautiful stadiums are being built, and so I think those are the signs. The fact that you can watch almost any league in the world on a Saturday, Sunday, or a Wednesday. There's so much soccer available on TV. I'm a Liverpool supporter because back in the day there was 2 games on a weekend, and they happen to be on more than most clubs. That shows how old I am. And so that's how I kind of fell in love with them. But now you can watch any EFL game. I watched a handful of EFL, some connections and some things there on the weekends. And so I think just those are signs of growth to me. I think the influence of supporter culture and what it brings to a match, and what those supporters bring to their community, and what they're another outreach of a club, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're the biggest club in the United States or you're the smallest grassroots club in League 2 or W League or what have you, your staffing is never enough, right? So you have to have ambassadors, people that are going to do it on their own because they believe in it, are going to go do things in the community. And that's just a byproduct of having a sport in these communities of all sizes. So I think the signs of growth are tremendous. I think the fact that, almost every evening, if you're watching TV, you're going to see some reference to soccer in a commercial. Didn't see that 20 years ago. Didn't see that leading up to the 94 World Cup. But now, I mean, there's, whether it's Messi kicking a ball with an empty Ultra bottle there, or whatever it is, there's a soccer is mainstream, and that's massive for the growth. But it really comes down to the work that all these clubs are doing in their communities. And a lot of them get documented really, really well. And some of them don't get documented as much as they should. And that's why I'm a big believer in media like you're doing and others are doing, highlighting those stories around the country. And we're fortunate that we have a lot of those in USL right now.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think being part of the community of content creators, soccer storytellers, whatever you want to call it, here in the US, a lot of those exciting stories and teams, whether it was like just being up at Portland Hearts of Pine, USL League One, or being up at Rhode Island FC, and you talk about, if we want to keep it on the New England one, because that's where my mind has been recently with a lot of the research and series we're working on, like Vermont Green selling out a few thousand tickets in under 30 seconds for a 4th division, pre-professional, fully amateur team, like, is amazing, right? The fact that I was trying to get up there and they had run out of media press passes, and it took them 2 days to get back to me because they had so much demand and volume. for these, national semifinal, and then the final they're going to host. It's incredible to see it. I think those type of stories are, I'm excited about a lot of things in American soccer right now, and those are a really important part of it. When we move on to opportunities, right? We talk about community impact, but in order to do that, you have to have finances. You have to be commercially viable. We've seen that. That's probably been one of the main themes of American soccer over the last 150 years. And yes, we do have that much history in the United States, but it's mostly been finances and interest, and how do we make this happen? And there's clearly a big change at all levels of where we're seeing the opportunity. One thing that's going into that, and it's a chicken and egg scenario here, but it's USL. You guys have gotten a lot of attention, understandably, for announcing what every soccer zealot has been begging for in this country for a long time, is promotion relegation to align with the pathway that it's done pretty much in 98% of other countries in the world. And then for various reasons. And hey, we want to thank MLS for breaking the curse and still being here 30 years later. So obviously they've done a lot of things right, but we're a huge country, a diverse country. There's a lot of opportunity. What kind of went into some of those conversations among owners, among people behind the scenes? Because I think from a business standpoint, the risk of relegation could be catastrophic, right? I see it in you talk about the EFL, the impact it has on clubs and communities, it can be really terrible, right? So, but there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of growth here. So what were some of the conversations and thoughts, and how do you guys see this, this brave, courageous decision and the opportunity that comes with it?
Yeah, full credit goes to the ownership groups within League One and Championship. We went on a journey with them, as our president, Paul McDonough, often likes to say, right? We all had to go on this journey, and conversations started prior to any of us being here at USL, and they get kind of stalled out a little bit. COVID occurred, and coming out of it, and where was the game going? And, as you said, there's 150 years of history. That history is often like this, right? It's a roller coaster. And so I think when we finally, got to having real conversations in earnest, the best thing that we were able to do is listen. What were their concerns? What were they excited about? What were the unknowns? What were the things that they had heard, or they, had a friend who was involved in the sport over in Europe? And, there was just a lot of different things that we had to work our way through. And that only happens with trust, and a high level of trust between everyone that was involved in those conversations. And where we ended up getting to is a really good spot where we think we can do something that's unique. We think we can put more eyeballs on the sport than ever before in the States at the professional level, because of the number of communities that are going to have the opportunity to work their way up, or, like you said, perhaps get relegated. So we've got a long way to go. There's a lot of work to do yet. We're working on a lot of exciting things in terms of what does the modeling look like. We know how important the playoff system is in American sports. We can't truly get rid of that, but we can't have a pro rel system that the 98% of the world looks at and like, well, that's a joke. Like, it's got to have some authenticity to it. We have to have, some things in it, but we know it's got to be Americanized a little bit. So we're working on those, and that's been really educational to learn all the different ways it's done, because majority of Americans, we look to the English system, right, and how they do it. But Germany does it different. Belgium does it different. So it's been really cool to work on that project. And then on the business metrics, one of the things that you mentioned is, if you get relegated, it's catastrophe, right? We hope it gets to that level at the USL at some point with our promotion relegation, because that means we have a massive media deal. We don't have a massive media deal right now. We have great partnership with CBS and all the work that they're doing in Golazo, that 24-hour channel, really, again, telling the stories and doing those things. But also our partnership with ESPN, it's not there yet. So one of our owners summed it up best. He said, look, if we get relegated, I'm sure on our way down, people are going to be kicking and screaming, but they're still going to come to games because they're going to want to be the 12th man or 12th woman and trying to push us up, right, and get us out of that relegation zone. And if we go down, we're just going to have to call on them again to get us back up. So, we don't have the, some of the big pitfalls that they have over in Europe. We'll probably, hopefully we get to that at some point. But it will be interesting to see how it all works, all the dynamics. But the one sporting event that Americans consistently have been so enthralled in is March Madness. Now the transfer portal, we can't get into that. That's a whole nother topic, in college sports and all those things. But the mid-major that makes the run and knocks off a Big Ten team or an SEC team, the coach that now in the transfer portal, right? He brings 4 D2 players with him up to the D1 school. They win the conference tournament. They make the dance. Like, people follow those stories. We all know Sunderland. We all know Wrexham now. We're about to know Birmingham City with the new Amazon Prime thing coming out on that one. So we know those stories. We have those stories here in the States. And when we have promotion relegation, there'll be some real bite to those stories, right? Because a club that's currently in League One, let's pick on an next. We'll just use Portland Hearts of Pine, right? They have their chance to go work their way up, where now they're playing against the Sacramentos, the Louisvilles, the Detroits, and whoever's in the championship. Let's pick one of the smaller markets. Colorado Springs, they won it last year. Colorado Springs is not Denver. It is not Sacramento. It's not Phoenix. But if they win that, they're going to go up and they're going to play with those bigger markets. So Americans love those type of storylines in sports, and I think that's why we're so bullish on what it's going to bring. We also think, and we've had these conversations with others in the soccer industry on the sporting side, it's really going to elevate the level of pressure. So much of our game, and rightfully so much of our game has been about development, about growing the sport, growing the communities, the community impact, creating that atmosphere in a stadium. But at the end of it, in professional sports, you're trying to win. You're trying to, still move players on and those things. And that comes with playing in real games, playing under pressure. There's nothing like walking into a stadium and, if you're walking into Rhode Island, there's 10,000 people there and they do not want you to lose that match. That's pressure. That's how players grow and develop. You can't do that when you're 10. You have to grow and take risk and try, as a former coach or a coach, you have to try those things. But when you're the 23-year-old pro, who's now in his second year, or you're the 19-year-old that bypassed college, and you're playing in front of 10,000 people and a lot is on the line, that's when you see the growth. And that really hit home for me when I saw the pressure last year in the final when Colorado Springs hosted Rhode Island. Now, Rhode Island had gone on a heck of a run to get to the final, and they had a ton of traveling fans, and they had been on the road, and you're at altitude, and there's a lot of things, but Colorado Springs felt as much pressure in that match as Rhode Island did, because they had gone on a run at home, and the expectation now was let's win this thing, let's go for it. We've been around for 10 years. We're in the final. The pressure that was on those players' faces when they walked out of the tunnel, and some of them played the game of their lives, right? And responded. I think we're going to see another tick of development out of this system where there's real pressure on the line.
When you say pressure, another word that comes along with that for me is like meaning, right? And like relevance, like, hey, because the game means something. That's something I hear a lot with, we're talking about EFL. I'll plug my club that I support in the EFL, Port Vale, from League One, they were League Two, right? And if you guys want to hear that story, go watch the YouTube video. I'm very fortunate for that, the whole thing to be part of my life. But a lot of things I hear about when they're signing, like, they'd signed a guy from the Everton Academy, but never played men's football, as they call it. He's like, it's totally different coming in, not only because of the level of play, but like it meant something. You're playing the Premier League under 23s league, fine. Like, you might be playing for a chance to get scout or seen, but none of those results actually have any bearing, whereas you show up and somebody's paying their hard-earned money for you to play, and you don't give everything out there, you're going to get stick, like you feel it. But similar to that, and I'm glad you brought up this talent piece, this development piece, because you think of the upside of media and that revenue, but also the talent. And that's something we've seen in recent years. Like, again, talk about indicators for me of seeing USL being able to sell guys from the championship to Europe for 6, in some cases, 7 figures. And that talent piece, what is like, could you really spell it out for us? What does promotion relegation offer? Do you think it incentivizes clubs to develop talent rather than, or are we just going to try to bring in guys because, hey, we're trying to win the league or whatever it is? How do you guys kind of see the landscape when it comes to giving opportunities for teams to really have a business plan around developing and selling, which is so common in the world of football?
Yeah, I think the great thing about USL, and the thing that I've always enjoyed about it, is clubs are their true own independent operating models, right? So Club A can have a completely different mission, DNA as a club than Club B. And that can be in the sporting and the business or commercial side. So some of them, I think you're going to see continue to lean heavily into the player development piece, whether that's acquiring young talent and giving an opportunity to play, as you said, men's football, not against 19 and 20-year-olds, but against men, against people with families, jobs on the line, pressure of the fans, pressure of going up, pressure of going down, advancing. So I think you're going to see some are going to do that. Some are going to try to continue to develop homegrown talent within their club and see what they can develop there. And we've got some good storylines within the league now in terms of that. And you're going to see some that are going to look to acquire talent and they're going to go for it. And we see that now. We see that every year in USL Championship as well as League One. Different levels of how they're going about it. How are they going to try to win a championship, or how are they going to try to move a player or two within the window. So I think that's one of the unique things as a league office. We don't control those outcomes or those business models that they want to do. We're here to advise. We're here to listen. We're here to ask the tough questions. If somebody comes and says, hey, I want to go do a complete development model, I want to have the average age of my team be 21 and a half. Okay, well, how talented are those 21 and a half year olds going to be, to play against some of these other teams? So we have those conversations, but at the end of the day, it's up to that owner, that ownership group, that sporting director, that senior leadership to decide how they're going to go about it. And I think that's what makes us unique, is really that's how the rest of the world is, right? It's not cookie cutter. What Chelsea is going to do is going to be different than, what a team, that just got promoted, is going to do. So I think it's unique that way. And I think that's why we'll see different levels of ways to go about it, different levels of growth. Some might, focus on the commercial side and, player development. Some might focus, a little bit on the commercial side and drive that revenue and that business side, but they're going to go all in on some player acquisitions or bringing in some young talent with the opportunity and the foresight and the idea and the plan to move them overseas or domestically, what have you. So I think that's what really leads to a unique landscape, within the USL clubs.
And I think on that topic of, what kind of makes USL unique, and then these opportunities with promotion, relegation coming in, what do you think in general has been some of these ingredients, this strategy that clubs have had in engaging? Because I think, again, if we're going to compare with MLS in the US and bringing people in, or even other American sports, to be fair, I think one thing that USL clubs have done well is what the markets might not be huge. The stadiums are not going to be the biggest in the country, but the clubs in general, and I think this is probably baked into that business model to survive and to thrive, is they really have to figure out how to get people involved and engaged. So what have you seen from clubs in general across the country that have actually led to that kind of buzz and engagement with fans? And where's maybe somewhere you guys think you could grow and improve on, and kind of hopes for this next level and next iteration of USL?
Sure. I think the first thing is that, it comes with the leadership, right? It starts at the top of the club. And at some clubs, that's the president, who the ownership group fully entrust for him or her to go drive that mission. Sometimes that ownership group is more involved day to day with the senior leadership, but it starts at the top and then it's infectious, right? So you come in, you understand, here's what we do, here's how we act, here's how we behave, here's how we participate in our community. Yeah, it says that player appearances are X, but we have an expectation you're going to go above that. And, we'll compensate you or whatever it is within the guidelines of the CBA and things like that. But if you're going to come here, you're not just going to train in the morning, go home to your apartment, hang out with your family, play games on Saturday and not be out. You're going to be doing stuff before, matches, after matches, during the week, within reason, obviously. But I think that that culture really starts at the top and goes into it. And I think we have some clubs that are very bullish about their culture. If you look at Detroit City, Oakland, New Mexico, what do they stand for? What are they about? And people rally behind that. I think the other thing that a lot of our clubs have done a really good job is they've involved all different areas of their communities. So if you look at Forward Madison and how they started and how the fans chose the name and how everything got built and the color scheme, and they listened, they went out and they had conversations. What are you looking for in a club that can be a gathering hub? And some soccer aficionados would come in and say, oh, I think, we need to have a coach that's going to play a progressive attacking style of football. And the guy who works across the street from him is like, I need good craft beer on the weekend and a ticket that doesn't make me broke if I want to take a friend to the match on Saturday. So it's all these different things that around the world create great clubs, right? It's all these different types of people. If you go to, I think any match, pretty much in the States at the pro level, men's or women's, you're going to see a wide variety of people there. And I think when clubs go get input and listen to the wide variety of people in their community, then I think they have a product that everybody feels a part of. And they feel like, what, win or lose, we're going to get behind, this group of 11 players on a Saturday night. Win or lose, we're going to go to that event on Tuesday when they're doing a cleanup at the city park, after a storm came through. We're going to go there. And sometimes it's a supporters group that does it. Sometimes it's a club. Sometimes they do it together. But there's just so many ways that, you have to really engage with the community. And of course, now in social media, that's one way to engage. But being out there, being relevant, communicating to your players and your staff how important that is, if it is important to you. So expectations can be set from the get-go. And there's so many, I've left out a ton of examples of clubs that are doing great work in their communities. But when you see it, it's really something special. And again, full credit to those groups that are engaged in it. And look, it's helping them on the business side. It's putting butts in seats. It's a relationship. It's not a transactional piece. You're not just buying a ticket, to go to a game on Saturday. Now, look, there are people that, casual fans will go do that. We see a lot of those casual fans go, I didn't know that club has a free academy. I didn't know that club does this reading program, in the off months where players go. I didn't know that. And then they get engaged in that. They feel a part of it. And then now that casual fan becomes a supporter, a season ticket holder, somebody that comes to 6 out of 18 matches a year, whatever it is. We see that growth. And I think we're seeing that all across the country in a number of these clubs.
And with all these new-ish clubs and projects, that's actually something I've seen around the world that a lot of other countries are actually looking to the US for. So a lot of what the clubs you guys are doing at USL level are actually kind of setting standard and laying blueprints for what people can do, not only in the US, but also abroad. And then you just kind of have to do things that fit the values and culture of that local area. And yeah, you talk about the player appearances and being involved. When I was at Portland Hearts of Pine, I actually just made a LinkedIn post with this, kind of like put my video up. I mean, it felt like the players obviously signing for the kids and high-fiving, but then like a lot of like adults, 25 and up stayed around just to say, hey, high five. Hey, like, and then players are like, oh, how was your vacation? Or like, it's like, oh, you guys actually see each other every couple of weeks. And there's something really wonderful to this. And I think players appreciate it too, because they could have had the worst game of their career, but it's like a little different when people know you personally. They might say something, they might say it to your face, they might say they're a friend, but like, it's not the same, like, kind of vitriolic sort of thing we sometimes see in sports. So I think that personal relationship is important and an asset that USL clubs are definitely using to grow the game here. Jeremy, this has been great. Really excited and happy to be able to chat with you finally and connect on this. But we're going to get to some of our final segments here as we wrap up, and I'm excited to get your answer on this next one. There's really no rules for this. It could be any player, any level. We know, we don't know, dead or alive, whatever you want, but tell us your all-time five-a-side team without forgetting the most important part, that you have to play somewhere in that squad. So it's you and 4 people you're going to take on the world with.
That's a good one. First question, goalkeepers necessary?
Up to you. So some people, I personally am more of like, I'll go for like a towering, dominating center back who's going to do a little bit of that. I don't want to give it up for a keeper. Some people go for a keeper, so that's your choice, Jeremy.
Okay. Last question: Are there walls? Are we playing old school 5-a-side indoor soccer, or is this like in a park on a pitch?
Good.
Because the old coach in me, this matters.
Yeah, it is. It does matter. I envision walls, but maybe more of like rectangular shape, not necessarily like our hockey style walls, whether that's a really wonderfully American thing that nobody else really has. I'm envisioning kind of like rectangular walls, hip height walls, no kick-ins or anything. It's free play.
Got it. Okay. So I am going to grab a goalkeeper. I'll take Brad Guzan from Atlanta United because I coached him and I know he's got good feet. So if we're down, he can step forward, as we see in TST, come forward and play with his feet. When he played for me in Chicago, he's actually a center back, only trained as a goalkeeper, played in the field. So I would take him. So then you got myself, and I would play in the back, especially nowadays. I would take somebody you don't know. My college roommate from University of Wisconsin Oshkosh had, brief, stints in the pros, indoor and outdoor. Greg Henschel, because he can score against anybody.
All right.
I got to go with Pele. He's the best of all
Mhm.
time, and I think with the boards, I think no matter how old he is, he would still be able to utilize those and do it.
Yep.
And I would probably, because we're going to need somebody creative, because that's not me. I would take Ruud Gullit. I would take him because I think he's got some flair, and you need a little bit of that out there. Do I need one more?
I think so. You had your keeper. I think you've got it.
Yeah,
Pele,
Brad.
Ruud Gullit yourself, and yeah, there's your 5.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Get us a
Who's your
match.
bench? Yeah, who's your bench player? Who's your first on the bench? Because it
All
seemed
right.
like you had one more. You had somebody ready.
Yeah, because I think you need some American bite. Not that I don't have that or Brad doesn't have that. I would go old school, and I would go Rudy Glenn. Played at Indiana, played for Chicago Sting, nasty center midfielder. Had a few sniffs with the national team way back in the '80s, but I'd put Rudy in there too.
Okay, I didn't know the name of Rudy, but now I do. I'm gonna have to.
It's got that ring to it
Google
too.
him
So.
right after this. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You can't have too much American bite in your 5-a-side. We got to have as much as we can get, Jeremy. So brilliant. That's a fun team. I think of that team, only Pele has been a carryover from other guests of ours who have mentioned. So otherwise, you have a unique team that you put out there. So be excited to see. And then as we move on here to kind of put a finishing note on what's been a great conversation, could you complete the sentence, because football?
Because football, I enjoy coming to work every day for the last, whatever, 30 plus years. And, I know they always say, do what you enjoy. You'll never work a day in your life. I've worked. I feel it in my bones, from standing on the sidelines and traveling on buses and all those things. But because of football, I mean, I've enjoyed everything, and it's created a lot of great, memories and great people that I've worked with, great opportunities. And I don't think I get this if I choose a different path, whether that's a different sport or a different passion. I just don't think I meet the type of people I've been able to work with, have as season ticket holders that have become friends, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the special thing about this sport.
Isn't something about this game just keeps us hooked, and I don't think it's stopping anytime soon with all the great work you guys are doing within the USL, and we've got the World Cup coming, and there's such opportunity there, and then the Women's World Cup, and just, I think we're poised to stay on a good path, and we hope just keep spreading the game and what it means to us, to more people, and kind of getting stronger through that. So Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. If people want to get in touch with you, follow what's going on with USL, what's the best place to go to do that?
Yeah, obviously all of our socials for USL, from everything from, the League Two final, which you mentioned, Vermont Green, all the way to the kickoff of the Super League Championship, getting into the playoffs, League One, all of that on our social channels. Myself, I'm happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. So that's the best place to connect with me. I do a pretty good job of keeping up with that, and always try to make time to jump on a call or to make a connection for somebody. So please, if I can help anybody, that would be the spot to do it.
Awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening and watching. Appreciate you being here. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace.